Okay. Hi, Ronit. I'm Marine, and I'm super excited to be doing this video profile with you today. I'll just ask you some questions and then we'll get started. But can you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your story, like your background, and obviously like your business that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I got into vacation rentals at a very young age. My parents have been in the industry for a while, and I grew up around that. So I kind of already knew that starting my own thing was the path I always wanted to take. I've never grown up with someone working under someone. It's always been like my parents doing their own thing. So that's what I've always strived to do. And in high school, I kind of took over my parents' business, which was very difficult, but I learned an incredible amount about vacation rentals and generally like org structures, growth strategies, etc. And let's kind of transition now into being a Berkeley student and founding an ed tech startup, right? Where I've taken a lot of the values that I did learn, kind of starting my own um, actual startup in the real world, right? And some things that I'm passionate about. So Mutate's kind of an extension of what I've always wanted to do in education, which is actually let people use AI in a beneficial way and increase student accountability, but also keeping them engaged.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Ronit. And I would love to hear a little bit more about New Tate and what you're actually trying to solve with it, like how you kind of approached this challenge and what you decided was the solution and how you're working on that
Mhm.
now.
So we initially started just being like a AI reader, right? Where we can take a more like comprehensive approach and actually make people understand a document, right? While using AI. So we speed up like actual learning and also speed up comprehension. And we realized that like although that's cool, right? And although like that's where my experience with ChatGPT lies, um, it's not really where the market is, right? So we've kind of transitioned more towards a B2B model where we did a fuckload of interviews to pivot, right? Like over 200. And a lot of different like actual observational interviews, talking to professors, psychologists, UX researchers, blah blah blah, and a lot of general deep research. And what we found was that 80% of students don't read assigned readings. And this isn't something that we found in interviews. Like these are objective statistics that we found that haven't been solved, right? And if 4 in 5 students are not engaging with class materials, that's a huge liability for education because they aren't prepared for class anymore. They're not interacting with like materials in the way they're supposed to, and blah 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 blah. Right? We can already kind of think of how not engaging with materials is not going to help you learn, right? And then we throw in AI to the mix, right? Where students are fundamentally changing how they're interacting with their class materials, right? And it's not just a matter of skipping over things. It's the fact that they're not learning at all. Like the current reading checks for education don't work, right? And in a lot of our interviews, we found that you could get away with pretty much anything within 2 minutes. We gave them a case study of 20 pages, and what we found was that 2 minutes was all it took for them to generate an A plus answer to the page, even if they have no experience with AI, right? So the current reading checks to determine student engagement simply don't work anymore, and there's no real solution for that. So huge little pivot. Um, we're not just like an AI reader anymore, and we're trying to like actually talk to professors and educators and understand like what they've done in the past, what doesn't work, what does work in terms of actually increasing student accountability.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of takeaways from that, and not just about New Tate, um, you're always wrong, and there's always no clear path to go down, right? Where everybody else has different ideas, and in terms of like working with someone and under someone, you always have instructions on what to do, right? And people have this idea of decision making as I need to find the right decision, but when you look at it, you like you essentially have no clear path. It's just option A, option B, and each one is equally valid in your head. So it's a lot harder than people think to just be decisive in the real world and actually go and do shit, right? There's a lot of like decision anxiety and decision freezing that happens that you just kind of need to get over. Like be decisive, be just make a change and don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah, okay, perfect. No, I really I like what you said about the 4 in 5 students don't really actually read their class readings because I know I see that myself as a student. I know a lot of my peers do that. So I like that there's a very clear challenge that you're trying to solve, and it's not just for the students, but it's also for the educators and in long term. But going a little bit more into like what you're actually doing, like what do you think New Tate is offering that is different than like what everything else like has to offer?
Yeah. I don't think there's a software out there that really tries to increase student engagement and accountability at the same time, right? Where like the closest a student can get is like Notebook LM, where they're increasing engagement with the paper, but they're not even interacting with the document itself, right? Most AI reading isn't really reading the document. You're just analyzing an external source and then kind of getting information from that. It's more designed for information synthesis, which is just like pulling key details out instead of actually interacting and learning and going through those like comprehension processes, right? So in terms of like what we've done is a tried to increase interactability with the actual document itself, right? So whether that's having like, for example, like the questions mapped to the relevant portions of the text. So as you're reading, you'll have the question like right next to it, right next to where the answer is supposed to be, right? Where it becomes a lot easier to go and interact with the document itself than go and cheat with ChatGPT, right? Um, Currently we're kind of at the stage where like if I were to draw a little line graph here or like a little plot, right? This is cheating with AI and this is actually reading the document. Students are kind of already here, right? Like it's much easier to make this jump to cheating with AI than go like all the way back down to here, right? So we're trying to shift that line and go, hey, if there's ways for it to be easier for you to find the answers within just interacting itself instead of going and cheating with AI, students are more incentivized to go do that, right? And then another thing is educator analytics, right? Where you can see, hey, how did the student talk with chatbots? How did they like actually answer the questions? What time was spent per page on average, right? What questions or like highlighted text did they use our AI tools on, right? So you get like that bunch of data for educators to say, hey, they spent 30% less time on pages 15 to 20, right? Where this, and this was talked about. Maybe you should like focus on this because most students actually got this question wrong, right? Or a lot of students highlighted the paragraph about like the Layman series or whatever, right? And they asked for clarification on this question, right? Three different people. So that kind of analytics as well helps, but like in general, helping people have a more like analytical sense of where do I need to adapt my lessons? Where do those kind of things need to happen? And then just how do we actually make sure students are reading, they're engaging with the paper, they're coming to class prepared and learning through the materials because that's a huge problem right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Ronit. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the time we shared today, and thank you.